Critical, so thank you for being here. I want to just take a minute to thank the Mass Mutual Center, which was kind enough to work with us and provide this space to us this morning. It's a fantastic space, so round of applause to our friends at the Mass Mutual Center. I also want to recognize my co-chair of Rebuild Springfield, Jerry Hayes, who's here. And as you know, Mayor Sarno appointed a Rebuild Springfield Advisory Committee, and it is a grassroots-driven planning process. And so I want to recognize the members who are here. So first, our chairman, Reverend Bruce Shaw, David Jarnes from Citywide, and Shalom Cologne. I think that's everybody. If I missed you, I'm terribly sorry, but I think those are the members of our committee that are here. So again, the purpose really of today is to get your input. We've had a terrific week starting on Tuesday, where we had 3 meetings this week within the planning districts, and you're going to hear more about that, I'm sure, from Bobby and others later on. But we got a tremendous amount of valuable input that's going to help lead the planning process. And that is what we want to hear more of today, is to take that good work that happened in the neighborhoods, bring it up to a citywide level, crystallize some of those thoughts, and then Bobby and her team will go off and come back at our next iteration of these meetings to have some deeper dialogue with some concepts. So it's important to stay engaged. This is going to be a iterative process. This is the first phase, this series of meetings this week. So please continue to stay involved, spread the word. We want to see more folks come out. We really want this to be driven by the community, by residents, by business owners and others in the city, so please spread the word. So I do want to introduce Mayor Sarno, who's going to come up and offer us some greetings. And Mayor, thank you again for your leadership since June 1st and the great work of the city departments and many that are here today in terms of the tremendous effort that's been made thus far to get us stabilized and moving forward. And so thank you and welcome, Mayor.
Good morning. And thank you to each and every one of you, to Nick Vetrilakis and co-chair Jerry Hayes, and to Bobby Hill and Concordia and your team, and mainly to the residents of the city of Springfield that are participating in these meetings. That is key. We're working this grassroots from the bottom up, and we want your suggestions, your ideas, your wisdom, your constructive criticism, because we're all in this all together. And as we continue to rebuild, we want to be efficient, effective, and compassionate. But also, this is an opportunity not only to protect the fabric of our neighborhoods and enhance the fabric of our neighborhoods and other sections that have been hit by devastating tornado, but it is also an opportunity to come back bigger, better, and stronger. So these engagement meetings, and that's exactly what they are, engagement meetings, a give and take, that's going to help us move the city of Springfield forward. So I appreciate that you've taken the time to show up at our neighborhood meetings, the citywide meetings. These will continue as we work with Mr. Vetrilakis and Mr. Hayes, my advisory committee, Bobby here in Concordia, to put together the phase of our rebuilding aspects. We've come a long way in 4.5 months, but there's a long way to go. When we do this, as I am, we do this, and sometimes it gets a little tedious at times, but we do this, and when Bobby and I were speaking earlier this morning, so that when we look down the road a year from now, 2 years from now, 14 years from now, people look back and laugh and say, all that tedious hard work is paid off, and we now continue to have a wonderful city. So to each and every one of you, God bless you, God bless your families, and God bless our city of Springfield. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mayor, and that's really absolutely true. In fact, we were at a meeting yesterday, Bobby and I, with some folks in this room, and it was really heartening to hear from one of the participants in that meeting of his personal experience in New Orleans and reflecting on the good work that was done by Concordia. And we didn't need to go out and sell that. He saw it firsthand. as a member of our community, so it was just really, really thrilling to hear that. So let me introduce Bobby Hill. Bobby is the lead of Concordia and the lead of the team and the various consultants that are here with us working on this plan. We are thrilled to have her in Springfield. She is energetic and passionate about this work, and we know that she's going to lead us to a great place at the end of the day. So let me introduce Bobby Hill.
I think people are going to get tired of seeing me. But anyway, we've had such a fantastic time in Springfield. This is, I think, probably my 5th or 6th trip here, but we've been here now for about 10 days, and I just want to say thank you to everybody for welcoming us and with open arms, and we've had some wonderful, productive conversations, both at our district meetings as well as lots of one-on-one meetings, and I know everybody on our team has been experiencing that, and we are just in love with Springfield. What a great, fantastic place you have here, and we already see some remarkable visions and opportunities for the future. So, let's get started. First of all, we want to sort of set the context, and I want to invite my colleague, David Dixon, from Goody Clancy, a neighbor just across the way in Boston, and he's going to share with us some thoughts about setting the context for our larger citywide planning.
Thanks, Bobby, and it's great to see all of you. I haven't been here for 10 days, but for 3 days, but it's been a great and very meaningful 3 days, and it's terrific to see all of you, particularly to see all of you now for the second time, because for many of you, for the second time this week. What I'm going to do is open the discussion kind of at, I don't know, 100,000 feet, and then we'll probably bring it down to about 10 feet by the end of the morning. I want to I want to sort of talk to all of you about some trends going on across America, actually, in much of the world, particularly in America, that have created an era of opportunity for cities and very much Springfield that we haven't had since the Depression. The tornado that you suffered from, as the mayor said, really should be approached first with compassion. It was a terrible and difficult experience, and I can't imagine what it must have been like for those most directly affected or affected because your community has been affected. But if it had happened in, 1981, 91, maybe even 2001, it would in some ways have been yet a more terrible event because it was harder to rebuild. It was harder to come back, for cities to rebuild, for cities to come back basically at any point until about 5 or 6 years ago than it's been since the Depression. And I want to sort of try and make this real and try and make it real for Springfield, because when the mayor talked about going ahead 5 years, looking back and really being proud of what you've accomplished, you have a real opportunity to accomplish things now over the next 5 years that you haven't had, and it's really worth listening to them and joining the effort. So, there's a pointer here. These charts here tell a real story. First of all, I must admit I was a little surprised, should I say it? I didn't realize Springfield had actually been adding jobs over the last 20 years. Thought maybe things have been sort of stagnant, but you have been adding jobs. But the real story is that you've been adding jobs that require an education, require training, or you need what are called knowledge workers to do them at a much faster rate. You've been losing other kinds of jobs and gaining those kinds of jobs. That can be really wrenching for a lot of people. It can be really difficult. Transition does not come easily. It brings hardship, but it also brings opportunities. And I'm going to talk for a minute, not because the hardship doesn't matter, but about the opportunities that chart at the bottom. Those are eds and meds jobs. You gained a good 100,000 plus jobs in business services, in education, in medicine. There's a second story there for, I don't know, the last, let's say, 50 years, somebody got a good job in Springfield, there's a good chance they moved out to someplace else and drove in the morning. That era is starting to change. These days, when somebody gets a good job in Springfield, there's a growing chance, and it grows every year, that they're going to want to live in Springfield. They're going to want to live in the South End, in Forest Park, in McKnight, in the city, because we are growing as a nation much more pro-urban in our feelings and thinkings. And there's been a transition that's been going on most rapidly in the last 10 years, and it sort of starts with demographics. So you can read the words on the screen. I'll tell you, more single women buy houses in America today, probably twice as many, or maybe 50% more, than families with a husband, a father, a mother, one works and they have kids. It's not the Ozzie and Harriet America anymore. This is in Springfield. If you look across the entire region, somewhere between 60 and 66% of you live in 1- and 2-person households. This is not an anti-kid statement. I have 2 kids. I love them dearly. But we as a society are changing. When 60% of everyone in this region, this is probably twice the percentage of 10 years ago, is a single or living in a couple, many more people, a much larger percentage of you can choose to live in urban neighborhoods. Not everybody will, but more and more of you are, and that's what I want to talk about and why. What this is doing is creating literal opportunities for cities we haven't seen, because this is from an urban economist named Chris Nelson, who's just terrific. Well, America probably has, he actually in 2007 said, America has as much large lot suburban housing as it will need in 2030. And actually there's growing evidence that we unfortunately have too many of those houses, but half as much urban housing. And now think your neighborhoods and the opportunity you have. And this is not about changing your neighborhoods, displacing people. This is about letting you be in charge of one of the most amazing planning opportunities that any of us will have, because the wind is behind your sails now. You have a chance to shape a future with some people who really want to come join you. This is changing the way the real estate markets work. They're turning upside down. So it used to be that a suburban office park was about the most valuable thing you could do. By 2011, in many regions, and this is spreading and it's happening in Springfield, walkable, mixed-use places like Main Street are worth more than single-use office parks out in the suburbs or retail. The trend is happening in different pace at a different pace in different places, but the real growth in value is coming in places like downtown Springfield. And this is particularly true of housing. So how many of you know the term walk score? Somebody raise your hand? Okay, all right, okay, thank you. Walk score is a comparative measure of different neighborhoods. You can go to the web and type in walk score, type in your address, and it will give you your house's walk score. Okay. And if you want to sell it, definitely go look or buy a house. A walk score says, compared to other places, how many of the things you want to do? Go to church, go to the supermarket, go to a bar, go to your daycare, childcare, go get your hair done. And how many of these things can you walk to? And the higher the rating, it turns out in America today, and this was not true 10 years ago, the more valuable your house tends to be. So that, it's a group called CEOs for Cities. This is all private sector stuff. Went out with 24 metropolitan areas and discovered that by 2010, for every increased point in walk score, on average, it's not absolute neighborhood, housing was worth $500, in some cases $3,000 more for the same housing unit. So walk score is 50, house is worth $100,000, walk score is 75, same house could be worth $130,000 or $140,000. And I hope that begins to feel true to you, because it is a trend that is accelerating. And it again is creating, it means you can, when you invest in Springfield, you create value today. Perhaps the most important consideration is how we go about creating jobs. It used to be that people followed jobs and everybody was trying to give tax breaks to get the next 200 jobs to come to their community. Believe me, it's very hard to lure any jobs to Massachusetts. We're an expensive place to live. However, actually very few jobs are created by attracting an employer these days. Most jobs most of the jobs that are growing, the education and medicine, professional services, entrepreneurial startups, etc. This is where real job growth is happening. These jobs are created where the people who can do these jobs want to live. It turns out that all our job growth is coming in these areas. The chart that you had that aimed up. And we're actually educating about half to 2/3 of the folks that we're going to need to fill these jobs. So the employers who want to grow, who need to be where these people want to be, are really interested in what cities have lively downtowns and cool neighborhoods like the South End, etc. Because when you go out and survey 25 to 34-year-olds, and most of us stop moving after 34, we think we do, but we don't very much. As opposed to 10 years ago when they said, I'm going to go to Houston because I can get a job there. These days they say, I want to go to a place where I can live the kind of lifestyle I want. And 2/3 of them then go on to say that that lifestyle is about a downtown, a diverse neighborhood where I can walk around that's near a downtown, a place that's got culture and history. The more creative they are, the more likely they are to do that. So to make this just a wee bit real, think about Detroit, most devastated major city in America. The number of college-educated 25 to 34-year-olds living in downtown Detroit or close-in neighborhoods grew by almost 50% in the last decade. Most of that in the last 5 years. Baltimore, which most of us do not think of as another San Francisco, same group grew 66%. They made up a sizable portion of Baltimore's gated population in the last couple of years. This is a trend happening across the country. What's the Willows? You've got some of the kinds of housing here and places here that are attracting these folks. And what this means is, as we sit down to plan today, this is not a matter of forgetting all the folks who aren't these people. It's a matter of everybody in this room, everybody who lives in these neighborhoods, thinking, well, with these opportunities, how would we want to take advantage of them? So, you start with, well, what do people say they want when they say where they want to live? It turns out, as opposed to the 1990s, where golf courses, that just doesn't help downtown Springfield or any of your neighborhoods, were the top of the list. And homogeneity was important to people, getting as far away from work as possible. The same list in 2011 has none of the top factors, the top criteria that the 1990 list has. It starts with main streets, and you, boy, literally have one. Diversity. Everyone's probably heard that Brooklyn's the new Manhattan. A lot of that has to do with the diversity you find among the people, even older people, empty nesters, are uncomfortable living in a neighborhood these days where everyone looks like them. They want to feel like they're part of a real America. Living near work, the ability to walk to work. And then, let's look at where do people want to work. It was office parks. Prestige used to matter. Believe me, a suburban office park doesn't spell prestige to a lot of people today, but getting a chance to work in the building on Elm Street out here does in 2011. Live near work, walkable environment, fun. Part of this comes again from who's looking for a place to work. It is not IBM hiring 1,000 people that creates jobs. I was just in Baltimore taking a hard look at where job formation was there. Most of the growth in downtown jobs, and downtown jobs are really growing in Baltimore, are all small startup businesses, entrepreneurs, folks who decide to do a catering business, women who want to design clothes, people who've got the next sort of high-tech idea. And Springfield's got the same kind of potential and economy. I'm going to close by talking about some work that is basically experience how I got to know Bobby and Steve, and they are great people. It's a privilege to work with them again. And that is New Orleans. We did a lot of planning in New Orleans, and the round of planning they led was the really important planning, was the recovery plan for New Orleans. Nothing has seared environmental responsibility into our minds more than New Orleans. Well, it was a devastated place, but worse yet, it was a place that had a pretty tough history around being divided. They hadn't quite got around to resolving race and things like that. The chance to recover has really brought that community together. It has made tremendous strides. They made tremendous strides when about halfway through the planning process, as far as I noticed, they began to say, we actually have a shared destiny. We're not a bunch of individual neighborhoods all trying to fight for a shrinking pie. We're a city that can grow a pie and all benefit if we work together. And they also realized they had a resource that's worth more than anything, and that's your Main Street here. It's places like this. They had livability, they had walkability, they had history, they had the kinds of things that really attract growth in the 21st century. We wanted to open this way, not to tell you, what you should tell us about the future, but to help everybody understand that after maybe 40 pretty tough years, Springfield has a really great future, and we look forward. It's a great privilege to working with you to start shaping that. Thank you very much.
Okay, so before we get going here, I just want to make sure that we've all welcomed each other and introduced ourselves. So you may know some or most people at your table, but let's just take half a minute here and be sure that you've introduced yourself to everyone at the table. You're going to be working together. So say hello, say good morning.
David, I go.
Didn't mean to do that.
Oops.
Okay.
What was that about? We don't do that one? Is he on the team?
He is on my team, I'll tell you that. That's my 15-month-old grandson, Benjamin. Isn't he precious? Yeah. Eating a biscuit, and already his parents are protecting his ears from loud music, so that's what that was about. All right, so let me, whoops.
All right, Bobby, we know he's cute.
Okay, everybody. Oh.
Shows the future. What is his name?
His name is Benjamin.
Benjamin. Okay. Benjamin, you're thinking.
Who's the person who really knows how to make it come? How to deal with that.
Bobby's trying to say is the future is food and music.
Child project.
Relationship. Benjamin knows how to figure this out. Exactly.
This table, the second exercise is
popular
specific issues. So on each of those pages, there's some information about what previous there are two parallel organizations. One we talk a lot about. We have such a separate. So.
Sam was glad you were great. My mother-in-law said,
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Okay, now it's time to get back to it. Again, just to lay the context and explain for those of you that have not been involved thus far, maybe this is your first meeting, we really are approaching this at two levels. We are seizing the opportunity to address the issue of tornado recovery and look at those tornado impacted areas, and we've lumped them together in what we're calling 3 planning districts. We had our meetings Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night. A lot of really good, productive work came out of that. And then we're going to share a little bit about what happened in those meetings and have that be part of our conversation for today. We have this iterative process, as Nick mentioned earlier, where we are continually going from big to small to big to small. And the purpose of that is to make sure that we're not talking singularly, that we are trying to knit this together so that Springfield can come together and have a vision that everybody is aware of, that everybody is participating in, and that people can really be there to market this community, to be a part of implementing this plan. And this is certainly something that we have seen in the neighborhoods and the communities where all of our members of our team have been working in disaster recovery. We do have this tool that is really beginning to catch on fire, and this is a way for us to continue to keep people involved. The project website, which is rebuildspringfield.com. Information about the process, we will have a page on that website that after these series of meetings are done, there'll be a report so anybody and everybody can go and keep tabs of what's been happening as we go through the process. And then we have enlisted the help of MindMixer. And MindMixer is a public forum for ongoing dialogue. And people can make comments, people can second those comments, people can disagree or agree or whatever with those comments. And I really want to encourage everybody to go visit that website and see the kind of comments that have come up thus far. It's very encouraging. And very, very briefly, just to make sure you understand our whole team, this process was one that was really necessary, a sense of urgency, a lot to cover, and we wanted to be sure that the capacity to address that and to really listen and produce some plans that were going to be meaningful and not just have a shelf life drew us to pull together what we feel like is the best team in the country. So Concordia from New Orleans, we've done a lot of community planning and led the planning for New Orleans recovery. Goody Clancy, as you met David earlier, is from Boston, and they worked with us in New Orleans and subsequently led the planning process for New Orleans' new master plan. BNIM is from Kansas City, and they have most recently been working in Tuscaloosa, Joplin, Missouri, Greensburg, Kansas, very similar communities in some ways that have suffered similar disasters, and some remarkable stories that you'll hear about a little bit later today. And PPS, Project for Public Spaces from New York, who brings an international experience and perspective on how communities can catalyze public spaces to really enrich their communities and move forward to their vision. So, importantly, we want to share with you a framework, and this framework is how we are going to build this plan, in particular, citywide. We love this picture because we think this really illustrates a concept that was developed by Professor Leonard Dewell, a wacky professor from Berkeley who is now an emeritus professor, who happens to be a medical doctor and a PhD urban planner. Kind of an interesting combination, and he developed the theory of healthy cities, healthy communities, and he says that cities are like bodies, and our bodies have organs, and those organs are connected and interdependent. And if any one organ is not working, ultimately it's going to impact the whole body. And so we have to think of our cities in the same way, and our cities have arterial systems and nervous systems and places and programs that represent, if you will, city organs. And we, over the years, have developed this framework that we think, as we've vetted it over and over again, establishes what are the organs of a community. The physical, the cultural, the social, the organizational, the educational, and the economic domains that are at the heart and soul. And what's important, not only is each of those individually being healthy, but that they are connected. Because if they're disconnected, then there is a missing piece. So, in addition to that framework for understanding how we build the whole system, it's really, really important to think about the people component. The people, the structures, and by structures we mean what are those organizational structures that keep people involved and keep people engaged, process and relationships. What we learned in New Orleans and what we have learned throughout all of our planning is that this has to be a participatory process, and in order for implementation to be successful, people need to want to continue to be involved. And what might that look like? I know there are places around town we can see it. We can see it, we can see almost the whole, or in some cases, the whole. It's really an opportunity to think of all of those pieces located together so that it is walkable and so the community's needs are met. And the community can decide what the emphasis is on each of those things. And why is this relevant in Springfield? Well, in some cases, capital projects can create an opportunity to provide services to neighborhoods. Co-location makes economic sense, and we're going to tell you a little bit about that in a minute. Again, walkability leads to increased neighborhood safety. When people are on the streets, their eyes are on the streets, and they're keeping neighborhoods in downtown areas and such safe. Places for neighbors to socialize and get to know each other. And another thing to really think about is that if you have these nexus centers, they can also be a place of safety, of refuse in times of emergency. So I'm going to give you just a little example of what we talk about when we look at integrating these things. This is just an example of where a school was built in downtown Minneapolis. It was built in an underutilized office building. This is a K-12 school in downtown Minneapolis. Not only is this school green and LEED certified and energy efficient and all those things, but they don't have a gymnasium in the school. And do you know why? Because there's a YMCA a block away. That YMCA is underutilized during the day, and so they use that. They also didn't build a theater in this school. Do you know why? Because there's an Orpheum Theater across the street that is totally underutilized during the day. Those are some interesting kinds of integrative opportunities that cities need to think about. We don't need to be duplicating things. We need to think about how to integrate and how to have some economic efficiencies. And why is this relevant? It taps into existing resources instead of duplicating. There are some incredible resources and great bones in this city that we have seen as we've walked around. And again, it's all about the relationships, the partnerships, supporting the students having an opportunity to get out of their isolated environments and build those relationships and meet those mentors and develop the kind of confidence they need to be successful and promote urban culture. I'm going to give you just a real example that I think is really relevant here in Springfield. This is a neighborhood in Central City, New Orleans. We started planning in that neighborhood prior to Katrina. This was sort of your typical urban neighborhood that really was affected by desegregation, where anybody with means picked up and left and went to the suburbs. And what was left was a poor community, disinvestment, a lot of neglect in terms of property, then comes in the drugs, then comes in the crime and all of those kinds of things. But yet, a community that's in the heart of the city, a prime location, great bones, beautiful architecture, and people who lived in this community decided that they wanted to come together and really preserve what they had and celebrate it and bring it back to its glory days. What happened was they created a plan, a remarkable plan that out of that became an organization called the Central City Renaissance Alliance. The people who worked on that plan said, we're not going to let it go, we're going to see that it's implemented, we're going to be the umbrella organization that's going to drive that implementation, and we are going to support our community and make it happen. And why is this relevant? Again, it's a citizen-focused. It focuses on building the partnerships. We can't depend on the city or the federal government to do everything. These do have to happen in partnerships, and that, frankly, is what attracts public and private and philanthropic resources to help with implementation. These neighbors are engaged. These neighbors also, the little quote that you can read there, they created a community manifesto that here, 10 years later, they actually live by. And because they had a plan that they were committed to, when they came back after Katrina, they were well on their way to coming back strong and being a community that was a leader for other communities less fortunate. So now what we want to do is share with you the findings that we have that we learned from the different meetings that happened this week. And the Planning District 1 had their meetings last night. And so we want to talk about these and share with you. There'll be a much more elaborate report. It's going to be on the project website. But these are the things that we learned about out of District 1, and that is the South End and the metro area. Safe and clean. New and rebuilt community institutions. That's something that we heard across the city. How those schools, those other community centers and institutions coming back is really critical to the neighborhood thriving. Improved physical appearance, improved walkability, more and more connected destinations. And the goals that came out of that were community policing, code enforcement, grocery store and pharmacy, addition of middle-income housing, recognizing that having a mixed income, both mixed socioeconomic is what makes a community whole, mixed in terms of ethnicity is what makes it strong and healthy. Well-paid jobs, and again, a celebration of international identity and heritage of the South End. What were the findings in District 2? Proud neighborhoods coming together and to talk and be heard. Now this neighborhood was the Maple Hill Six Corners, Upper Hill, Lower Hill, is that correct? Am I saying that right? What rang true in that community was a really, really, really strong sense of community. Even though we know those are very different neighborhoods, people worked really well together. They really wanted to celebrate what they had, and we're very proud of that. So using the momentum, and this was something that I feel like they really latched on to, using the momentum to improve the mindset and the perception of the neighborhood. Perception is reality, and I know there are misperceptions about this neighborhood, and people felt strong and that there was much to be celebrated there. And then District 3, which was the East Forest Park and 16 Corners neighborhood. Again, building a strong sense of community, ready to take action. This community was definitely ready to take action. They also spoke about how important those cultural institutions, Cathedral High and the other public school, really important anchors in their community. And people talked about, yes, tree removal and debris removal and things that still needed to be addressed and taken care of. But people also spoke of, well, for once now, in certain places we can actually see the lake. And we loved our trees, but maybe there's an opportunity to celebrate that view and to think about how we replant it, and to think about trails and bike paths and more connectivity and walkability. And then citywide, what have we learned citywide? The strengths in Springfield, of course, location, connections, the building stock is quite remarkable. Cultural and historic attraction, cultural diversity, and of course, your education, your higher education institutions, both the college here in Springfield and the surrounding areas. And some of the challenges, and these are some things we need to think about as we move forward and build the plans. Education, especially public education, is a huge challenge across America and across urban centers. And we really must think about and seize the opportunity to connect, to have everybody understand the importance of education and how a connected community can really have a huge impact. Inequality among ethnic groups, concentration of poverty, disparate economic initiatives, and lack of a unified vision. So I want to end the presentation with this slide so that we can get going. As we know, people have a sense of urgency about having their needs met, and as winter approaches, people are concerned that with the snow and the cold weather, if we don't take care of getting roofs back on and windows and houses whole, that could be the end of it. And that's really, really important. But we must seize the opportunity to have a bigger, stronger longer vision for what Springfield is. And we love to share this slide of Oak Alley in New Orleans, on the river outside of New Orleans actually. And think about this beautiful plantation home. And it's called Oak Alley because of these beautiful live oak trees that line the approach to the plantation. The people that planted these trees never saw this, but they knew that they were planting these trees for a vision for the future, for many, many, many generations and hundreds of years. And so as we address the sense of urgency, we also need to stop and take a breath and think about what you do now that has an impact for this city that you may never see, but generations to come will, and you want to leave that kind of a legacy. Okay. He's back. Okay, so now we are going to get to work, our first exercise. And I believe you have on the back of your agenda, there is an explanation of the visioning exercise. So, you can take a look and I will explain what we're going to do here. We want you to imagine, think about the slide I just left you with. And again, let's think of the future. So let's imagine that you moved to a different community, hundreds of miles away, had a different life, moved on with your work and your families, and then 20 years later you decide to come back to Springfield. You come back to Springfield and you find the city has become everything you ever wanted. And you're walking down the street, you're walking down this vibrant downtown, or you're walking around your neighborhood to a little coffee shop, or you're gonna have a sandwich at a cool little restaurant, and you're gonna run into some of the residents. You might run into a high school student, a business owner, a tourist. And what do these people tell you about the Springfield of today? What are their shared values? What kind of a city is Springfield? What are Springfield's greatest accomplishments since you moved? So we'd like you to have a conversation. After you've had a minute to stop and think, have a conversation about that, and really think about, in a perfect world, what does that look like? And then, if you would, ask somebody to be a note taker, and let's just describe what that looks like. So let's take about, let me see, how many minutes are we taking to do this in there? About 20 minutes. All right, let's begin the conversation.
Since we don't have that.